Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I am Tia Taylor, and I'm coming to you from Michigan Coalition for Human Rights. And tonight we're having a delightful conversation. But before we even get into that, if you are interested in knowing more about MCHR, please go to our website at mchr.org, where our mission is. Michigan Coalition for Human Rights promotes awareness of, commitment to, and advocacy for human rights and the environmental rights of planet Earth through education, community organization, and action. MCHR opposes forces that suppress human dignity, freedom, and justice locally and around the world. We are so excited to be here tonight, excited about our conversation. We have with us this evening Jerry King and Terry Braggs. No, Terry, did I say that right? Tony Braggs and Jerry King. And they are talking to us today. Our conversation is about justice in action, community voices, policy, choices. And we are going to have this conversation. I'm telling you, this is really innovative because for the first time, we are really talking about shifting the narrative statewide, really focusing on Michigan and shifting the narrative on equity and policy through grassroots advocacy. And then the question is, how do we assess this initiative? How do we assess? How do we measure? Where's our evidence base regarding policy? So, with no further ado, I'm going to bring before you Jerry King, and he's going to tell us a little bit about himself. I love the A. Randolph. Did I say that right?
Asa Philip
Uh,
Randolph Institute.
A. Philip Rand. Wait, and you know what? Because A. Philip Randolph, was a very good friend of my parents.
Wow.
He goes in history as being a phenomenal person in our community, even when I was a little girl. So, Jerry, I want you to go ahead and tell us about yourself. Tell us a little about the program Metro Detroit APRI and what is happening and what we're doing, what you're doing in the community. And we're going to talk about how we can support these efforts and get behind this initiative. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Okay, well, greetings, brothers and sisters, my union siblings. My name is Jerry Kane, and I am state president of the A. Philip Randolph Institute in Michigan. I'm also the chapter president of Metro Detroit A. Philip Randolph Institute. The institute as a whole has about 130 to 150 chapters across the nation. Is led by Cleola Brown. It was founded by A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin. And we continue their work in protecting the Voter Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, and making sure that people of color participate, um, not in a vacuum, but with the labor movement as a whole, because at the end of the day, no matter how different we are, who we believe in, who we love, whatever those differences are that people normally find a reason to divide themselves. The workplace is where we all go and we all have a common ground. We're in the workplace to take care of our families, right? That's at the end of the day, we have basic needs, and we need to be able to fulfill those basic needs. And in a labor union with collective bargaining, you have a better shot at a fair slice of the pie for the labor, for the wealth that your labor creates, and you have a voice and a seat at the table. And all working men and women, and even the underserved, should have a voice at the table, because some of the underserved aren't underserved because they choose to. They're in that situation because of greed, all right, because of bad decisions made by leaders and policymakers that have impacted them. If you look at the Flint water situation and those kids impacted by the lead because of poor decisions, right? And so we continue that work through for advocating for policy for working class people. We're particular, but we're nonpartisan, and we don't care about who you vote. All we want to do is make sure that we connect ourselves to people and policy that's going to work on our benefit. And so, with that said, so we we put together this plan so that we can really do a better job of listening to the people in our community. So this plan is community driven. It has real change starts with understanding the lived experience and aspirations of diverse communities. The voices will guide our efforts. It's equity focused. We're committed to dismantling systemic inequities and prioritizing the needs of those who have been historically marginalized. Truth and transparency. We are dedicated to uncovering the truth, the true impact of policies, both intended and unintended, and sharing that knowledge openly, right? And action oriented. We are empowering communities with the information and resources they need to advocate for themselves and shape their own future. We're not telling anybody what to do. We want to hear from them and we want to learn from them and we want to walk together to identify the right policies and to be able to project our voice in that space.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, and thank you for the work that you do. I want to bring on your partner, one of your partners, and Tony Braggs, and I want him to share a little bit about himself. Um, Tony, welcome to the Michigan Coalition for Human Rights, our
Welcome.
Candid Conversations. Thank you for joining us today. Can you tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So, to our listeners and our viewers, greetings. So, my name is Tony Braggs, and I'm a proud UAW member. I'm speaking from APRI, which is A. Philip Randolph Institution, but with the knowledge of my day job at United Way um, as a liaison. Um, Kind of piggyback on some of the things that Jerry said with the plan that we're putting together. Um, with my day job, I do understand litigation of the basic needs, the struggle for the everyday people. That's what I deal with every day, and a lot of times um, we try to back it up with not with numbers. So here in southeastern Michigan, over 45% of the families struggle just to meet the basic needs. So we try to identify the problem and then address it, and whatever that looks like. So Jerry presented a plan, and I love it, and we're gonna go full blast and just try to meet the needs and deal with the everyday issues that our people deal with every day.
Right. That's good. That's good. Excellent. Excellent. And, when you talk about measuring progress and advocacy, um, a lot of times we don't understand what that looks like or have an idea of how that actually impacts us. So, my first question, and um, Jerry, you can start off and you guys can just go ahead and start having this conversation.
All
What inspired the creation of this new comprehensive plan? And I want you to talk about the plan for community engagement policy and the assessment that you have developed through APRI.
What inspired me is the diverse opinions, the diverse needs, and being in my day job, I'm a labor representative within the UAW. So I service the nation in employee assistance program and dealing with new hiring orientation and things of that. And so, you know, in talking to people and the various things I do with APRI and just people, I understand the diversity of needs and wants and expectations. And a lot of times I hear people talking at people and not listening to people. And so what I wanted to do is put together a plan where we can push our biases away and
Mhm.
create a framework to collect and obtain an understanding of expectations in our community. What is it that we want across the board to take care of ourselves? What is it that we need? What are our fears? What scares us? What concerns us? And then what policies are rendered towards helping us deal with those issues? And as those policies materialize, some of the things we want and some of our expectations, are there consequences um, based on how those things are tried to be granted and achieved? And so we need to obtain that information, obtain that understanding, and then we need to map it. We need to map it with a policy map. We need to understand, you know, what this is. That's why we created a questionnaire, and we have about 50 questions, and they're just a framework that can be tweaked for each constituency's needs, you know, and to make sure that our symbols are in alignment. How I speak and how I talk, based on my where I'm at, the roles that I've played. As I communicate that to others, they might not understand that, right? And
Yeah.
so we want to make sure that the leaders and coalition members that we partner with can take this framework and start to tweak it and massage it to meet their constituencies, but to basically achieve the core, which is understanding those expectations. And then as we understand those expectations and we live through our experiences of policy and the maturing of policy, um,
Mhm.
how is our policies lining up with our expectations? And are there, if there's some unexpected consequences, if those consequences hurt people, how do we mitigate that hurt? How do we help those people,
Mhm.
um, you know, deal with things like the rising price of food, um, resources and needs, you know, basic needs that might rise, the cost might rise, and they don't have the funds to be able to purchase those things, feed
Mhm.
their family, you know, and basically, you know, around the core things of basic needs. And so that's why we put it together to gather that information to create a policy map. And then once we get that policy map together and we understand that thing, we have to continue to walk it down and have these conversations as things mature, and then create a report card, right? A report
Mhm.
card based on those issues within the policy map, right? And so within this policy map, um, if you want me to go on, just, you know, key
Mhm.
policy areas, you know, we're talking about economic well-being, right? What is that? What does that mean to you? Job creation, wage growth, housing affordability, impact of small businesses, impact of immigration, impact of tariffs, right? What happens
Mhm.
when some of our wants and desires actually take root and we didn't understand the foundation to some of those that support some of those basic needs and the cost structure of those things, right?
Yeah.
Uh, what social well-being, access to quality education and healthcare, social safety nets, community health and safety, right? Education
Mhm. Yeah.
quality. And then, you know, you go into environmental justice, right? You know, regulations, right? The access to clean energy, and green spaces, the impact of environmental issues on vulnerable communities, because we have many communities that are heavily impacted with pollution.
Yeah.
And so how do these policies and how do these desires and expectations, how are they rendered currently with what's being ministered in our communities? And then you have justice and equality, right? Criminal justice reform, voting rights protection, um, and systemic inequalities. And then you have border security. And then again, the impact on. So with these particular questions, they all relate to a policy map. And as we survey those questions and we start to come to an understanding, then we start to collect the data on how these things are impacting um, different communities, right? Because some people are going to be okay, some people aren't. What does that look like?
Right, right. That's good. That's good. Yeah. And that's true. Some people are impacted. Sometimes a policy will benefit others and then annihilate another group. And so it's important to be able to measure. I mean, because if the policy is working, if it's benefiting the people, then okay, it's a go. But if the masses are being effective, how are we disseminating that information to say, okay, this needs to be revamped, right? Is that what we're
Right.
saying?
Yeah, and and that breaks down into to the coalition is going to be built up of people in different lanes, right?
Mhm.
My lane is advocating for policy. Tony is a specialist in understanding of the resources available to people in need. All right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
his lane isn't going to be out there, fighting to change policy. His lane is to be okay. We got some people doing good over here, but what about these people over here that are struggling and starving? Right? How do we
Yeah.
help them? How do we connect them? Because we love everybody, and
Yeah.
even though our values sometimes aren't aligned, when one's up, the other's down, and then sometimes that changes, right? And so, he can give us some expertise and understanding how we
Mhm.
help those that are less fortunate than those that are prospering, right? And
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, Tony, chime on in. We
Yeah,
are
yeah,
so blessed to have
yeah,
you with us
yes,
tonight.
yes. It's so blessed to be here. It's so blessed to be here. And listen, listening to you, and then my brother Jerry, I talk to him all the time. That's why I was so excited when he presented the plan that he was trying to present to the masses. It's just like, yes, I'm all in. So with some of the stuff that Jerry was just speaking of, more so, all of it makes sense, But I like how he homed in, like he spoke about the issues that from the presentation that he's putting out about pollution and justice reform and border issues. All those things are major. But in my lane, when we talk about the basic needs, so that's where my expertise is. Where so I try to make sure the everyday people, the everyday person that's struggling to meet the needs. Like I said in my presentation, 45% of the families here in southeastern Michigan are living below the poverty level. So we try to identify the issues and try to figure out how can we make a change or make a difference. And I love what Jerry said. It really starts with policy. That's where it all starts with policy change. But in the meantime, until the policy kind of go through all the stuff that it needs to go through, how can we help the basic people get the basic needs that they need, like food, so we try to go out with what my expertise is, try to go out and get them the food that they need, food boxes, or go talk to and have conversations and with the forgotten harvests and gleaners to make sure my people or our people get the food, the basic food that they need, just to meet the everyday struggles and try to help them with their light bill and their gas bill and their water bill, have verbiage for that and just help them with the different things with childcare and healthcare, prescription cost discount, different partners that in my day job that we partner with to help people get their taxes done, when their funds ain't where they need to be. And we got partners with different partners that we partner with in my day job to help the everyday people get the things that they need to get done. So I love what Jerry put together. I love it because really it's at the end of the day, it's about helping the everyday people. But it
Yeah.
all falls back and circle back around the policy. And that is very important. And we need, and that's why I love that survey that he's putting out there, so we can find out just from the everyday regular Joe, what can we do to help change the issues,
Yeah.
to meet the different needs. So I love what he's presenting. I love this round table. I love this conversation piece because at the end of the day, if we help just one, that means we won.
That's right. That's right. Oh, that's so good, Tony. And I really want to hone in. Did you say 45%?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. 45%
45
of
are
the
below,
families are below the poverty level here in
are
southeastern Michigan.
below the, and I think people don't understand what that looks like. 45% is almost 50%. That's
Yes, ma'am.
almost one out of every two
Yes.
people are below poverty.
So if you got 10 people living on your block, at least four of them, a little bit over four of them are struggling. You know.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. And I think, I think it's important to recognize that because a lot of times we look at the numbers. Let's just say 45%, but these are people we're talking about.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
You know,
ma'am.
this is not just a number. These are real lives. These are real families that are below
Yes.
the lowest income, right?
Yes. Yes.
Below poverty. And
Below.
what is the household poverty level right now?
If now don't quote me, I believe right
Mhm.
now it's 80. If the last number I looked at, Miss Tia, don't quote me on it. But I believe it was right up under 80. Yes, right
Eight,
up under 80. 80,000
eighty
for for
thousand.
for a
Okay.
family. Yes.
That's a lot of people under 80.
Yes.
For a family of how many?
That's a family of two.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's because now at one point, of course, really telling my age now. At one point, 80,000 um, could significantly handle a family of four.
You know, I
But now because the economy, and this is the it's so mind-boggling because everything has gone up,
the,
but a lot of times the pay has not.
yes, yes. I just told a story, Tia, that the other day to some new hires. At one time, a couple of $100 and I don't want to tell my age at AMP or Farmer Jack.
Yeah,
At Farmer Jack, a couple $100 will fill my whole trunk up.
that's a whole month's worth of food.
Right. Now a couple $100 only fill up that front seat. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I know that I've had to be strategic in my shopping for groceries, for my family.
Yes.
This is a real thing. So I'm so glad that we are starting to have some evidence base around policy, around what's happening, so we can make some changes and bring value back to our community. It's
Absolutely.
so important. So, what are some of the core pillars of the action plan um, that maybe compared to previous efforts? What are some of the core pillars that the plan really goes over?
Okay. So I guess the core pillars. Pull this out real quick.
Hmm.
All right. So I mean, basically, it really it's gonna roll out in phases, right?
Hmm.
Community dialogue and focus groups to start. Um,
Okay.
Securing accessible locations, recruiting diverse participants, right? We want to get a diverse group of people. Um, for instance, right now we're organizing and for May Day
Mm,
2025. Okay, and the
okay.
coalition, the May Day Detroit Coalition, was inspired when the UAW negotiated expiration of its contract for the day before May Day 2028. All right.
Mhm.
And with that, trying to build a coalition around May Day, one of the things that came up was the farmers at the farmers market. All right.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
they are impacted because some of those farmers can't find workers to harvest the produce, right?
Yeah.
And when that produce is in harvest, right, it rots, right? Then what happens? The price of produce goes up, right? And
Yeah.
so, one of our things is, so that's one of the diverse groups that I want to focus on is is identifying the questions in the survey that connects to them in their struggle. And then
Mhm.
when you look at policy changes in the USDA, right? Some of the farmers have a subsidy for farm equipment and things of that. So
Yeah.
if that farm equipment isn't subsidized, right, by the federal
Mhm.
government as it was previously, those farmers could potentially lose their farms, right? Because they can't pay their debt.
Mhm.
All right.
Mhm.
And if they lose their farms, then their family loses a legacy.
Yeah.
Um, you say Big Agri buys up those farms, right? And then
Mhm.
we don't
Mhm.
have the same thing that we're used to is somebody with pride and legacy feeding us, caring about
Mhm.
the soil, and doing the
Yeah.
things necessary to continue that legacy, right? And now
Mhm.
it's about a profit margin, and it's exchanged on the stock market. And we all know how those things change, right? When you get the corporate influence. I mean, it's okay to have a business, but I really believe that all businesses to benefit human existence, not take away
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
not put us in a bad situation. So it's just those diverse communities, targeted
Mhm.
outreach, online surveys, being able to reach out not just in the focus groups, but in online formats and broken down to meet certain demographics, certain areas, right? Certain groups that
Mhm.
are targeting certain people like those farmers. And I know some groups that were working and dealing with the farmers that were picking the berries and when they went on strike. So connecting to those groups to be able to find our niche in that area to be able to get
Mhm.
that information on those impacts, not just the farmers,
Yeah.
but then the workers, right? And then,
Mhm.
moving next into that data into that phase two would be the development of the community impact report card, right? And
Mhm.
the metric identification, researching existing metrics and indicators used by to measure policy impacts in areas of economic
Mhm.
well-being, social well-being, environmental justice, and justice and
Mhm.
equality, and finding and consulting with those experts and the economists to help us really understand those impacts. The people
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
that help shape policy, and I've had the opportunity in some of my work around environmental to
Mhm.
work with policy shapers. I had a
Yeah.
chance to work with a gentleman that David Foster was the um, the senior advisor to the Secretary of Labor, not Labor, but of I believe it's Energy under the Obama
Mhm.
administration, right?
Mm.
We did an MIT paperwork, and I learned how he took our work around community benefits and environmental impact associated with that and pollution and studied the community benefit that I was involved in, and we created policy and
Yeah.
policy recommendations to go down. So we want to be able to get this type of information so that we can push up policy recommendations and have those experts help us navigate that lane. And then
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
data collection and the guidance and what else we have here. So the report card phase three of that, after we get all that information, is really the mitigation and advocacy, right? Which is number one, as we talked about, helping those people because policy doesn't change overnight, and sometimes it
Mhm.
doesn't change, and people continue to hurt. And so, being able to find ways to help mitigate those people and help those people transition maybe into another lane where those things aren't impacting them the same. And then,
Okay.
with that information, then we want to move into community education. How do we educate the community to articulate their voice, to articulate their needs, and how they can sit and influence policy themselves? Um, and
Right.
and then with that, using that energy to build our coalitions and help filter those people and their basic needs and interests into the groups that will help them lift their voices. And then, hey, direct action when necessary to speak
Yeah.
truth to power. All right.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
again, back to policy advocacy and the evaluation and the adaptation, because this is going to be an ongoing thing. It's not going to get done
Mhm.
in one cycle. It looks like we need to learn to do this um, in eternity and build the next generation to continue the struggle, because this struggle we are in is a forever struggle. There's always going to be one pushing this way, one pushing that way. Our job is
Mhm.
to build the activists and the knowledge base and pass that on to the next generation, because their struggle is going to be real and it's going to be
Yeah.
continuous.
Yeah, I think that's important to recognize that this is a time in our history that we haven't known in a very long time. And the community engagement is essential with the success of this initiative. And you talked a lot about engaging the community, a little bit about the farmers. Um, and how are what kind of strategies did people use before historically that marginalized our communities or overlooked communities across Michigan? Um, because we do have in Michigan marginalization. We do have, it doesn't, our landscape does not look like justice.
I don't think that we're reinventing a wheel to a degree.
Hmm.
I think that there's been a shift in our culture. I think there's been a shift in our educational platforms.
Hmm.
They're not teaching the same. They're not even teaching civic engagement in schools anymore, right?
Right,
Right. And
right.
so, and so, and in some places, if you have knowledge, you understand that they're changing textbooks. They're changing education platforms, right? Um, so it's our jobs, those of us that know, to re-engage and
Hmm.
and utilize this opportunity of struggle to engage those impacted and give them some energy and guidance and listen to them and encourage them to come out of their shell and to take their seat at the table of power, because a
Yeah,
lot of people don't believe that they have power. I
yeah,
didn't believe it. I didn't know I would do many of the things that I've done, right?
yeah.
Luckily, one thing is my family came from kind of like both sides of the track, and I saw my grandfather and his side do many great things. I mean, my grandfather is a founding member of the American Postal Workers Union. All right,
Mm.
he led the committee that led to three unions merging, which created the energy to merge the other two unions to form that union,
Mhm.
which is one of the biggest unions in the United States. I mean, when he was in office, my understanding is he had 350,000 members under him because he ran the motor vehicle division. And so,
Mm.
I've learned from his struggle and sitting at the table, but I definitely have been in spaces where I see the change. I see the lack of an educational system that really prepares us for struggle, um,
Yeah,
prepares us for critical thinking. We're being put in a situation where we just know how to push a button. Push the red button to stop it, the green button to go, but don't challenge me. But I'm
yes,
also inspired too, because in my professional work, I'm learning about things like psychological safety that people are
yeah,
looking to implement in the workplace. Um, we are taking hold of mental health. We are actually more actively seeking help for mental health issues than we ever had. And I see that in the young people, because
yes,
they are reaching out. They're not scared of it. Where stigma in my generation is always pushed back, because we always wanted to act like we always had it covered when we didn't.
hmm,
And
Right.
us leaders now, we have to reach out for help, and we have to show the younger generation that we're willing to access these tools and these resources that are here. So where we see the struggle creates energy, and we have to take the tools of the old and use the tools of the new, like social media and these electronic platforms, and connect to our people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something because I remember growing up in Detroit, and I remember the days of when I was younger and in Detroit. Um, Everywhere I went, I got to see me. Um, whether it was in any city office, the leadership, the civic leaders, the police, the fire department. I saw people that looked like me. I saw people that were invested into the community because they lived in the community. And so they took interest in the community. They took interest in what was happening. And as a result, as a young person, we were taught really to engage with our parents and to have a conversation, to be able to converse, to be able to have critical thought. You know, that was a practice. My mother and father would quiz us to see, are you thinking? Are you using your mind to think in a way that is not just patterned after what somebody else stated? So
Yeah.
Tony, I really want to hear from you because I know you got boots on the ground in the community. There's been a lot of change. And then we got to really start talking about how do we reel us back in. I have I help out with an after school program Monday through Friday, and the children don't know civics. They
Right.
didn't know. They didn't
So,
know Coleman Young.
yes, yes. And so
They didn't know who Mandela was.
that's very, very, very important. And I'm glad you said that. I was just listening to some of the things you just said, and just and it raised the hair on my neck, and some of the things that Jerry said, and it's I don't want to say troublesome, but it's like with the education. We
Mhm.
grew up where you have to work your whole math problem out. Kids now just they got calculators, they got Google, they got their phones. They don't know how to work the whole problem out. And I can take it to another down another street.
Mhm.
Tia. In church we had to know all the books of the Bible, and we had to go right to it. Now we at church, and they pastor from the pull the scripture out, and everybody got their phones, and they don't know what's the Old Testament, what's the New Testament. It just goes back to old school. To even when I was a little young fella growing up on Saturdays, it used to be a cartoon that came on, that commercial where I'm just a bill, and they talked
Yeah,
about silver, like Jerry said, silver engagement. It was a commercial or
yeah,
a cartoon where I'm just a bill, and it broke down all the layers, in DC, the House of Reps and the Senate, and all the bills, all the steps the bills had to go through, and it taught us that. And I love
yeah,
how you
yeah.
said, at one time growing up, everywhere you went, you saw someone that looks like us. And I love that about Coleman Young, and you touched on Coleman Young, because it was back in the day, if you wanted to work in the city, you had to live in the city. And when you live in the city, you take pride in the city.
Yeah.
And that was, we got away from that, but I love that. If you want a job here, you had to live here. And so when you live in a community, you're gonna take ownership when somebody throws paper out their car or a whole bag of trash, and you're gonna take ownership of that,
Yeah.
not working in the city and living out on 35-mile road and somewhere else. So I just look back at the history. But just to get back on focus, you're right. I think the way we changes the narrative is we have to continue to talk and educate our people, um,
Hmm.
and continue to
Hmm.
offer just resources and share with them every time we get a chance. We need to be talking and talking and talking and pouring into the community. I don't even want to say the young folks, because there's some folks that our age that just don't know. Just this morning, I was at a resource fair over in on the west side of Detroit, and I was sharing resources that a lot of people didn't know that was out there, and I shared with them. They're out there, and sometimes they just don't know, so we have to share with them. And then I left that function and went to Forgotten Harvest, and we packed up bags for the needy, and it was a 3-hour event, and we packed up bags at Forgotten Harvest, and it was a joy to do that. And then I'm gonna share this, Tia. I left there at 3:00 and went. One of my groups out in the UAW community service. We went and I had some bags. We packed up some bags for essential needs for women transitioning home from MDOC, so Michigan Department of Corrections. So a lot of women that are transitioning home, living in halfway houses, we gave them bags of essential needs and goods, and then shared stories of hope to them, and that was a feel-good story, and just shared with them. But it's about us educating the masses and just sharing with them. And some of the things where I'm boots on the ground is with my day job. I know I mentioned food boxes, and why that's so important. And I always touch on food boxes is because a lot of people struggle with paying their bills. So we try to be creative in how can we help them get their bills paid. So I share with them, it's kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul. And if you're gonna go spend $150 on some or $100 on some groceries, reach out to your resources at United Way. We get you a food box, we take that $100 and put it towards your light bill, where your lights ain't getting cut off. And then what we do is offer classes at Focus Hope, because we don't want to always help them. We want to educate the people about how can you make your money work for you, and just educate them on financial literacy. So we give classes for financial literacy. But one of the programs that I really love that we offer at my day job is we have partnered with H&R Block at United Way, and we tell our folks that don't know, since the partnership and partnerships are important. We have partnered with H&R Block. So I tell all my people, if you made less than $65,000 last year, call our 211 and you can get your taxes prepared for free. And a lot of them don't know that. So as opposed to going to spend that $500 to get your taxes prepared, call 211. It's a free resource information, and you can get your taxes prepared for free. But one of the things that I really love, Tia, is during the COVID pandemic, I advocated hard for our brothers and sisters in the UAW. And the reason I'm saying UAW, because that's my focus, what my job is really focused on. And I advocated at United Way to how can we help our brothers and sisters not lose their jobs, to try to get ahead of the curve. And a lot of them was losing their jobs because they didn't have a reliable transportation to get back and forth to work. So I advocated for a program, and United Way has partnered with Ford Motor Company. It's called Ride United. So anybody working at the UAW, if you need a ride back and forth to work, you will call 211 and get on the waiting list, and they will get you back and forth to work for up to a couple of weeks until you get on your feet, just to make sure you don't lose that job. So it's really just continuing to be creative and continue to advocate and talk to the people and just share with them different resources that they do not know that exist out there, and United Way loves to partner. We had an event a while ago in APRI, and I had Jerry there, and he spoke as well, and just really educating our people. We just got to educate our people, and we just got to keep our foot on the gas with that.
Yeah. Oh, this is wonderful. It is very impactful. I think that with the changes that did happen in the city, when we back in the day when you did have an interest of those who worked for the city, lived in the city.
Yes.
You there was a pride taken in how you cared for your home. You didn't have to own your home. Whether you rented or owned, you couldn't tell whether a person was renting or owning. The place was well kept. We couldn't walk on the lawn. Like, I don't know about you, but I had a neighbor, Miss Charleston, and she looked out that window and dared you to ride that bike across that lawn. Now you better
Absolutely.
not do it, you know.
Absolutely.
And but there was a community that looked out for you. You know, I remember I took the bus as a third grader, took the city bus. I could take the city bus and walk with my first grade brother and go home after school with my key around my neck
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and open the door until my mother and my father came home. Most my mother, when she got home, then she would get home first. And so it was okay because all the children were doing it. I wasn't the only child catching the bus, and it wasn't just the one neighbor.
Tia, remember the old saying, it takes a village
Yeah,
to raise a child?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I was part of that village. Whether it was that or the library where we learned to play chess. You had your learning philosophy where you would discuss books at the library for children on Saturday. You know, you children wouldn't even dare go to the library on a Saturday to engage in an extra class that's outside of your normal everyday classes. You know, so these are the things that were brought to the community so that we could have a discussion and we could think, critically think. We were prompted to do that
So how do
instead
we
of just,
so how do we change the narrative?
well, you're right. It has to take education and people who can engage engage the youth, but really educating the youth. And this is what I find to be the breaking point to allow us to move forward, and that is self-knowledge. When children learn about who they are, they become empowered. They become empowered to think. They become empowered to make a difference, and they take ownership and responsibility for their life. When they know who they are, when they know their history, when they know where they've come from. So when you don't teach history, when you don't know history, when you don't look to see what you're all about, you're disempowering not only yourself, but the next generation, you know? And so, how are these voices now? Because now we got to take the voice of the people and put it into policy. How is that done?
Jerry?
Okay. So, as we, capture the voices of the people, we find resources and help them create spaces to project their voice, right? And grow their leadership and learn how to step away from the front and get behind and coach
Yes.
them forward, right? It's more important to me. One of my, a lot, personally, I try to be kind of as low key as possible because I believe in pushing leaders and growing people and moving them up. And when it is right for me to walk in the room, people are there that I've been played a role in helping them, and they've helped me, and then we just negotiate. Why advance? Why negotiating? Right?
Yeah.
Building
Yeah.
power together, understanding that everybody has their lane and their role, and we learn from each other, we cultivate, and we help move each other forward. Nobody wants the light. I don't want the light. I want to push people forward, and I want to be able to connect and support them, and then we keep pulling people, and as we move together. So I think so we grow them, and then as we listen to voice, we create a list of demands.
Yeah.
And then we
Yeah.
take these demands to the table.
Yeah. Oh,
And
that's good. That's good.
and we speak to those policy leaders and present our demands and measure their not just their rhetoric, but what does the history of their actions speak on what they're telling us they're going to do to meet this miracle. They don't have a history of it. My father always said, if you haven't seen a change, why do you expect one?
Ooh.
All right.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
change comes through action, not word of mouth. So
That's right.
show me what you're going to do. We're going to watch you, but we're going to have a platform. We're going to make sure you know that platform, and we're going to grow support for that platform, and that's our
Yeah.
job. And we just need to empower, and in some places get out of the way and allow those who know the needs up to date, those that are impacted. My life, I'm not as impacted as others. I've
Yeah.
worked.
Yeah.
I've secured some things. Those things can still change though, but my struggle is different. My struggle is finding the energy and the desire to leave my home and my family to make sure that I'm not focused on just what I got, but I'm there to support and uplift those others, because if they continue to perish, who's going to perish? We're all going to perish, right? So
Yeah.
we have to
Yeah.
sacrifice. So a lot of it's going to come to personal sacrifice, um, and creating growth opportunities for others.
Wow. Thank you so much. I'm so blessed to have you guys tonight. And I really want our listeners to know what is coming up, how we can collaborate, how organizations can join the effort. And so I want you to make sure you post the information on our social media page, Jerry,
Okay.
when you have time. Any flyers, any upcoming events, because we want to be there. And Tony,
Yes, ma'am.
any last words of your vision? And this is, I'm going to ask you too, Jerry, your vision for the implementation of these assessments. What do you see?
Well, I like the question there. The challenging thing is getting it to the people. And I think to get it to the people, we have to meet them where they're at. We say, what do that looks like? Well, I'm glad you asked. That means going into the barbershops. That means going into the grocery store, having those conversations, um, tough ones, and present the question to them. Um, because if we don't, we have to gauge and not just go off of what we think the people feel. We have to ask those questions and then just take the results from those questions and
Yeah,
then kind of move forward from there. And it's very important. And I want to say this before I give it to Jerry: is policy does make a difference. It has to be policy in there, and we have to get the people out um, um, to make a change. We have
yeah,
to. We have to.
we have to.
Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes.
Jerry,
So
what's the vision look like? What are you seeing?
so I guess the vision starts with, number one, getting our community to understand the levers of power, and to
Yeah,
understand those levers of power have to be engaged, but that doesn't mean they're going to change anything right away. But as we learn and exercise these muscles, right, we start to learn what switches, once they line up, create change, right? Because people get discouraged because, um, things, they hope for one thing and it went another way, right?
yeah,
And they lose faith in the activities to make those change.
yeah.
But you have to stay engaged and learn. One of the
Yes.
greatest things I learned, because I read military strategy, um, is that you can start off losing, but while you're losing, you get to learn your enemy, right? You get to
Yeah,
learn their reach, right?
yeah,
And like if you look at Romo in World War II, how he swept through what was Africa and different things, but there was a time when that moment changed, and our side learned his strategies and learned his ability to reach, and we
mhm,
it takes a campaign to win a war. It's not
Yeah.
one battle. And so, I just, so we have people that have already taken this and worked it with their youth groups,
Yeah.
with labor movement. I know Tony has some work he's going to do with it in different spaces. We're hoping within the appropriate spaces within HCR, Michigan Coalition of Human Rights, that we can find some places where we can um, maybe move some of those questionnaires, those questions in appropriate spaces where they fit, and collect that feedback, and just constantly work with coalition members and our other chapters at APRI to have these conversations in different spaces, whether it's understanding the understanding of the cause of migration. See, I've
Yeah.
had a chance to work with School of America's Watch, where I was a national council member, and I took about 5 delegations down to Fort Benning, Georgia, to learn about the impact of bad trade agreements, right? Um, the impact of corporations that tell you to have a drink and a smile. Here,
Hmm.
when you learn about
Yeah.
them overseas in Latin America, you find out that they have been assassinating labor leaders and things like that, right? You know, so when you learn about these things and get a chance to educate people around why people come to America, why they're fleeing, the Northern Triangle, right? If you guys understand about,
Hmm.
and I've also taught on that. I
Hmm.
worked with Adonis, who shared his story. He's from what was that, Michigan, Michigan United, and he
Yeah.
talked about his grandfather and how his grandfather migrated back and forth between here and Mexico for work, and how he didn't cross the line crossed him. Grandfather,
Mm.
how that goes back, and um, immigration. There was no such thing as illegal some years ago, and
Right.
so things have changed, right? But
Yeah.
just being able to educate people, collect the data, and not lose faith in the struggle of learning, because it's not going to
Yes.
happen overnight. We got to continue and build. And right now, where we're talking, this is the opportunity to learn from this conversation, to learn
Yeah.
from others' attempts, and constantly come back to the table and advance it again. And then again, like I say, put those policy demands up front and
And,
Yeah.
center.
That
and real
makes
quick,
sense.
Tia, I like what Jerry said. It goes back to one man plant, the next man water. You know,
That's right.
it ain't
That's
gonna happen
right.
overnight.
No, no, but we got to get to planting, don't we?
Yes.
We got to get to planting and the watering.
Yes. Yes.
Tell you.
But I do want to add one thing, but and encourage people to and put them in spaces that challenge their belief systems, um, and so they can learn an appreciation. Because I'm gonna just give a story about MCHR. So I got involved with MCHR board many years ago now, right? And
Yeah.
I remember we did a reading of a play by a Detroit artist. And
Mm.
what I learned from my experiences with MCHR, the Bog Center, is
Yeah.
how much the arts plays a role in us being able to communicate to our community and open them up to see things they wouldn't normally see. That we were able to open the door through the arts,
Yes.
and all of these relationships from maybe going back to 2010 have been very fruitful for me,
Yeah.
and the work MCHR does with taking the youth on the freedom tours, right?
Yes. Yes.
And COVID set us all back a little bit. It's been a struggle getting my energy back up, because COVID
Mhm.
almost took me out, and
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
And
Many
you
others.
learn to
Yeah.
value your time a little differently, right? But we
Hmm.
got to get out our comfort zones, and challenge ourselves, and get
Yeah.
back to doing what we know we need to do. And that's
That's
why we're
right.
here today.
That is so right. I thank you so much, Jerry. Thank you, Tony. Thank you for coming. Thank you, everyone who's listening. And I'm excited that we can still move forward with change, move forward with our voices, and now assess really the work that is being done. And what do we need to do to make changes? I really appreciate the conversation this evening. And until next time, this is Tia Taylor with Candid Conversations coming from Michigan Coalition for Human Rights. Thank you again for coming, and I'll see you next month where we have another wonderful and dynamic conversation. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for having us.
Thank you.